Good evening, everyone. My name is David Adler, and I'm the General Coordinator of the Progressive International. A new solidarity movement is rising all around the world, from the United States and all parts, all corners of the globe. We are hearing the cry and the demand that Black lives matter. And the task of All Progressive International has always been to make solidarity more than a slogan, which means dismantling these institutions of racist violence everywhere. I'm joining you now from southern Italy, ground zero of the European Union's criminal regime of detention and deportation of migrants across the Mediterranean. To take seriously the call and the demand that Black Lives Matter is to make sure that we hear it everywhere. Today I'm joined by four incredible guests to speak about the challenge of protecting Black life and delivering migrant justice across this zone. First person who joins me today is Hassan Zakaria, who joins us from Tripoli to share his story and explain the situation on the ground in Libya. Next, we have Mattea Weihe of Sea Watch International, who will help us make sense of the situation on the Mediterranean and the essential work of fighting against that criminal migrant regime of the European Union and its friends in various international NGOs. Finally, we're joined by two members of the Progressive International Council, Anjali Nyabola in Nairobi and Asad Rehman in London, who will join us in conversation to make sense of how we should be situating the situation in the Mediterranean in a broader neo-colonial regime and the challenge of delivering migrant justice all around the world. So I pass the microphone now to Hassan, who will tell us a bit about his story and the situation on the ground in Tripoli. Hassan, thank you so much for joining us. I'll pass the floor to you now to tell us a bit about your story and a bit about your experience traveling up from Sudan and to help us make sense of the situation on the ground in Libya.
Hi, thank you, David, and all the team over there. I hope you are doing fine. Thank you for this great opportunity. I really appreciate it. I'm so happy to join you online, and I wish you can hear me very well because there is no power right now, so the power is connected with the network, and sometimes there is no network at all. So that's sometimes a problem here in the situation in trouble. Well, actually, my name is Hassan Zakaria Omar. I am Sudanese from South Kordofan State. Exactly, my hometown is a small city called Al-Daleng. Al-Daleng. If you check the map on South Kordofan, you'll find it. This is where I was born, and I grew up, and I started also my primary school there. When the war started in 2011 again, we moved south to a village. It's about 4 hours from Adalang. It's called Lagawa, which I consider it as a new home. And then the situation over there is not even allowed for me to stay because the tribe interaction negatively about the discrimination, persecution, and huge stuff like this. So I moved to Khartoum, and in Khartoum, I tried to finish my high school and then to finish also my university. And the situation with the previous regime, the dictatorship, al-Bashir, there is no way to find yourself over there at all, and because you should be ideologically belong to the specific a group like Islamic group, and also I have big issues how to deal with a group like this, so I couldn't even to find myself among them in Khartoum. So I was trying to find a work also to help my family, at least in our rural area over there, and I mean urban area. So it's quite hard also to find find a work, and if you find a work, it's like just that work has not a huge come for you to help you paying you necessary needs and life costs. So I find myself that there is no future in this country at all. No education, no work, and everything. You should be in a specific criteria until to be a part of normal Sudanese people. And I realized that there is no future for me here in the country. So I took my journey abroad to Libya through this desert. Uh, it's really so hard to cross the desert by the car, and there is not enough food, and there is a lot of struggling here. Firstly, we came to a specific area called Al Muthallas is a last location in Sudan, and then I crossed immediately. The next city is Al Kufra. It is in a border between. It is considered the first city close the border to Sudan. Then I spent there in Al Kufra about 2 weeks, and I found a Sudanese also um, driver. He drove the vehicle from city to city, and he put me as a helper for him to help him in the car until to cross the station of police and the government issue. Because I have come illegally to this country. I had tried to find a visa, but it's been rejected from different embassies. I had tried to got visa to Egypt, and I didn't find it. It's hard. It's been rejected financially and a lot of another stuff. And also to Libya here, I tried to find a visa. Also, there is no visa. So I moved to Libya illegally because I knew that there are many people can do that easier, and you maybe find better, secure, better life, secure life than here. And what exactly is happening in Sudan? There are many reasons. Like I lost two of my brothers in South Sudan there in the war in 2011, and that make me to uh, make me in very psychological clash and pressure. So until now, I'm trying to solve this problem psychologically, and that was so hard for me actually. So that's why I decided to leave the country, and I came to Libya. When I arrived to Kufra from Kufra with Sudanese guy, he convinced me there is nothing happening to you if you helping me. That's it. So I helped him in a car. Like if he's stuck in any situation, I can do something for him, helping in traveling, something like through desert. I have arrived to a city called Ijdabiya, and then I spent there about 2 weeks as well. And I moved to Bani Walid, and in Bani Walid, the police station took my passport, and they took me to the prison. So I spent more than 3 weeks in Bani Walid, and then there is a group of people come to take another African people. I was one of them, and I just after I get out of the prison, I I'm trying to run away from those people. But I found them too. They are asking about their smuggler, asking about money from everyone. If you're not paying, you're going to get shot. And there is a connection between them and the police, the smuggler and the police. That connection is really put me in very entrapped way. I wasn't anticipated it was easier between them to do that. So they're selling, the police selling us to smuggler, and also I spent there with the guy. I told him that there is no money. I don't have even family behind me to push for me. If I have $2,000, I will never be here. That's it, simply. and he said for me, you should stay here until I will come back to your issues. That's exactly in Bani Walid what's happening. After more than 3 next week, I spent it with the smuggler. There's many African people I saw from Niger, from Chad, from Bangladesh, from Egypt, and from Ethiopia, and there is a huge numbers of young girls and women over there. I saw them. They come at night, took the girl, and they brought them next night. When you saw on their face, you will find that it's quite actually how those girls wasn't slept, and at the same time they had got a very sorry, but it's very horrendous and sexuality issues that I saw. When I just at night, there is a Sudanese guy there. I met him. Told me we should try to run, and we ran away from the guy after spending with him a month. And I have arrived to Tripoli. In Tripoli, I was in an area called Al Khalla, which is now there is nobody living over there. It is in the south of the city. And when I arrived in March, in April, exactly the war has started. And we spent it under the war and airstrike and a lot of that's empire. I mean, it's my first time that to be in the middle of the battle. That's why it was so hard. Yani, hard to believe that you're gonna be alive. And also there is a culture between the people who fight with the government in trouble here. If they find a black person, you already targeted and they're gonna kill you immediately. If you're not gonna fight with them, they're gonna kill you. They give you just one offer. And yes, there is a Libyan guy that I had to spend with him all this time. I started to work with him in Al Khalla as the first step for me here in Tripoli with his family, and I tried to help him in his kids to get out after 23 days, I guess. According this last year, I guess I remember it's 23 days. We spent it uh, we spent it under in the middle of the battle. So after all this, we could get out and we came to the middle of the center of the trouble. At this time, I tried to be in touch with the UNHRC and the other NGO. Unfortunately, there is no reply, of course, and there is no doubt there is nobody answering the phone. That was a really big shock for me as well. So I went to I guess after arriving at the beginning of May, I went to the UNHRC office in Saraj, and they gave me a month to complete my registration, and I did that. It was really very tough days, especially the days of the war, and we come through actually very hard uh, time and psychological pressures and a lot of stuff because I haven't seen people dying in front of me. I just saw my brother in South Sudan dying because of war. But then, like, what is happening? It's just people mean to kill people because they are black people. I saw that there is negative group and they have to pay everybody. They have to pay $1,000. If you are not, you're gonna get shot. And they kill one of them because their friend to be afraid and to pay the money. That's it. So here in this country, if you have money, you're going to to improve your situation. If you don't have, it's a big problem because they are not believing in anything. They're just trying to selling you because you are, as a black person, you are bringing money for them. They're selling you to another smuggler. That exactly what is happening here in traveling. And there are different situations in this. We got directly threatened, and if someone will come to you and you need, for example, if you need to get work, someone will come to you in situation. Do you hear me, sir? Okay, okay. Uh, in a situation, sorry, guys, in a station of walking. There is many station in Tripoli here. You can find the black people walking around, the black young people walking around. If you go there, you will find a walk. The Libyan coming and took you to his house to, for example, do something for him. If you went there, they will immediately to after pay for you back. This is the first. And the second thing is you probably gonna got shot, or they're gonna took you to another person, or blah 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 blah. So that's really one of the difficult situations that I had in my life. Uh, okay, these are a part of the situation. So a life story happened to me. One day I went to walk the station walk, and then there is a Libyan guy. He has a new house for flat, I guess. He need to clean the structure and blah blah blah. I went there, and actually inside the house, after I finished all of them, he said to me, "You need to come to this store. There is something we need to clear." And when I entered he closed it. When I entered the store, he closed it behind, and he told me that you need to pay for me $1,000. If you aren't, I will gonna shot you and I will throw you in the Mediterranean. That is his word. I spent that night all afraid, spent inside. So the next day he came to me at 11 a.m. and he gave me a phone. He said to me, "There is a balance here. Call your relatives. We need you to pay for me right now." And I said, if I have $1,000 there, I wouldn't be here. Actually, you will never find me in Libya, by the way. And I haven't. I just to lying, try to lying for him. I just call phone number. It's closed. I said for him later, my family will be online, not now. And he said for me later at night, if there is nobody answer, I will kill you again. I will kill you. He told me that again. I will kill you and I will kill you. So after all this, I just wait him to leave the house. When he leaves house, I try to broken down the door, and I did that, and I jumping up and I moved. This this exactly this attack happened to me in area called Ar-Riyadiyah. In English, probably is a sport area. So it looks like a popular area, but people are there are not always good, I guess, because he's one of them. So that's why I said that. I left from there and I come back, but it was later. I come back to the UNHRC office to tell them that this is what blah 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 happened to me. The next day I came to them, and the UNHRC, there is a guy. I consider him. He's a human guy, you know. He deal with me very nicely, actually, and he told me that it's okay. My colleague will come to help you about that. And of course, his friend he come and make a lot interview about 15 minutes, and he told me that you will receive a phone call, and at this time we have no accommodation for you, and we have nothing to do for you. Just you're gonna receive a call for this week. And I spent that week, yes, course, I received a call from Rai. They took some information and they told me that we will call you back. This last March. And since that time, no one called me, and I was just waiting and waiting and waiting. With a pandemic, and we all understand that the matter of partner, you cannot go out in a specific time. So, um, all the phone numbers of the UNHCR I'm trying to call, no one replies. And even if you want to go there, the pandemic, there is no opportunity for you to access inside, except if you have an interview in a specific day or deadline about something, or to meet a doctor, and that's even in limited numbers. Every day, 13 person I get here in Gurji office, and in Saraj office, 15 person. And this, so what exactly was happening? So let's move to the another point which is important for me is crossing the sea. Truth be told, I had tried to cross the sea 2 times. Unfortunately, the 2 times we failed, and the Coast Guard, Libyan Coast Guard, brought us back. The first journey, it was about 6 hours, and after that, they follow us and they brought us back. When they brought us back to the beach, no one actually came to us like the UNHCR. We saw in many reports, and we support that in many reports for them that they welcoming the people they brought back. Unfortunately, the 2 times I wasn't lucky to meet them when they brought me back. Uh, so we tried, when they brought us back, we tried to escape. As usual, people doing this. I mean, the refugees, I mean, the migrants, or whatever you're saying, usually doing this. When they brought them to the beach, they're trying to escape in a one man, just one word, everybody run away. And we did that, and I was running in a very big fast. I'm trying to do that very speed. I'm so afraid because they are shutting people behind us. And this is happening every time, I guess, when they come to the beach and there is no UNHCR. I mean, there is no UNHCR team over there, or IOM, or the IRC, or the NGO. I mean, in general, come on, the NGO. I guess we lost 3 of my friends. I don't know them directly, but I knew them in a journey, and I guess they're dying. And we have also some people who's breaking his leg and blah blah blah. This is happening in the first journey. The second journey, we moved the first night and the second night, and we anticipated to see the rescue ship, any one of them, Sea-Watch or uh, uh, I don't remember the name of the rest, but Sea-Watch and Sea-Eye and Ocean Viking and blah blah. We anticipate to meet one of them, and it was about 3 afternoon. Unfortunately, the Libyan Coast Guard follow us, and when they come this time, one of them shot the boat, and the boat has 3 rooms. One of the rooms is poorly up. So the people who are here, about 7 persons, we lost them. Not they are not dying; they just in the water, but we can't save them. So the Libyan people just save us and leave them. We hear, I hear, and I cannot swear this is happening in front of my eyes. I cannot swear. They ask them, just please save us. We don't need to die here. Please save us. and they left it because for us, next time we shouldn't come back. And many story you can hear about this life. So they brought us to Tripoli, and at this time also the same thing. We came at night, at the middle of night. So they took us in a car, and after the car immediately leaves the beach, some of us trying to jumping up from the car and run, jumping up and run, and I was one of them. The rest of the people I don't know. In this country, I have to say clearly, the matter of insecurity is a really big issue, and it seems to be like you are a black person. It's a big problem here. You are immediately targeted by the young people, by the government people, by the police, by every person. He looks like you, like a third person in this life, like nothing. You just like an animal. That's what exactly I can see here. And it is really hard to everyone believe that uh, what he can see, he can explain it in words. It's really hard. That really means we need to think about it and to rephrase it and write it down in a book. If you said it, it's not enough. But anyway, the first point that's important for everybody, I'm telling you, I'm from the middle of the action. The black people is really targeted here. And if anything happens wrong from you with any Libyan guy, you will probably got the punish that you had never ever had it. So that's really so so bad. It's really so bad. So the people who are trying to cross the sea are actually losing hope in their home countries and in Libya here, and also losing hope from the UNHRC because they can't stay in they can't stay actually in insecure situations. Usually people come at you at night, jumping and stolen phone, money, and you can't speak out. You can't do anything because the gun on your head immediately. So this is a part of many stories here in this country, and the availability of the government, it's really, for me, it seems to be zero because the police, if you stop you in any station, they will take phone, money, and if you have a headphone, nice shoes, just things that it's not really important for the policeman who's walking and representative the government. Uh, that's really miserable for the government. So uh, I'm not sure about part of them, but most of them are. And this is what exactly I can summarize it about the situation here in Libya and the migrants and what the difficulties that we face many challenges, and it is really big one because the first important point for every human being, the security issue is important for everybody, and it is right for everyone. We escaped from our home because of insecurity issues, and now we face it here. And trying to cross the sea, trying to put yourself with the death in the same boat to find a better life, that is not an easy decision. I'm just trying to telling that most of people know that this what is important. It's not an easier to take a decision and to cross the sea, and no one knows you are gonna arrive or you're dying in, or they're gonna bring you back and dying here. You don't know what exactly happens to you. But even the decision of crossing the sea, it is really take you take courage, and it's not an easy. And if you put yourself in a sea, that means you're losing hope from everything behind. I'm just asking the NGO and the international community to be serious about the issue of refugees and the citizens of the Libyan, because what we have seen here, or what we're seeing here, is not has nothing to do with the humanity, has nothing to do with the human. George Floyd has been murdered in US, and the whole nation is starting a new revolution. Here we have every day a black person dying between a white hands, and even no one cares, even no one reported actually. So that's exactly what we would like to refer to the international community. We just need a safe place. We not need a better life. We are looking for a safe place for all refugees here in Libya. Just if you've got a great plan to evacuate them, for instance, to Niger, to any other country, just any other country, and it should be safe, that would be fine. And that would save a lot people, a lot refugees. And there is also many migrants here. Even they are not registered as a in UNHRC as a refugee. And those people also facing the same thing. I saw many people living here since a while, and they are not even refugees. Everybody needs to go home. But the same idea, the same discrimination view, the same race view, it's follow everybody. And I haven't seen discriminating clearly like this in my life. I just saw it here in Libya. Because you are nothing. You are not a human. Sometimes describe you like a donkey. Sorry for that. Also, you are like half burned. Half burned. It is a man described for the black people here in Libya. You have a half burned. Everybody as a culture. As a culture, it's run in their bloods. This is what's happening in a matter of refugees. Otherwise, the NGOs, I should have to say thank you for them for helping. Also, we have to say thank you for the UNHRC, but UNHRC usually aren't care about refugees, because I guess according to the weekly report that we everybody can see on Twitter, it is the fund is usually too present. It's usually too present, and we have uh 55, I guess, thousand registered with UNHRC. I guess this fund is not enough for them. And if you call them, and everybody trying to climb the UNHRC and trying to climb the staff over there. The staff is doing a great job, and according to the abilities and what they have, they're trying to helping us. But the reality of helping uh, helping refugees is need more funds. So that doesn't mean there is no weak point for the UNHRC here. We need to deal with the refugees in a very respectable way. I usually saw the guards outside, even if in Saraj I used to be there today, or in Gorgi, you will find the guard is usually nervous. He's usually nervous. You don't know why he's nervous of or why he's doing that. there is many questions coming into your mind. Why this guy is dealing with me like this? I haven't met him before. There is no problem between him and I. What's happening? Just because you are a black person, and he is just working because at the end of the month he needs just capable, he just needs salary. That's it. So if you think about it, there is inhumanity in some gods. You can't blame all of them, because I saw there is good people trying to help them. Um, and but the truth be told, we usually discriminating, and the refugees are afraid. Some of them are start to talk to them, and some of them are afraid. If they think for you, you have burned, you're just gonna keep silent, because you need to access inside, see you process inside the UNHCR office what is going on. So they're insulting people, and there are many bad behaviors that cannot be accepted from the official person working with the UNHRC or another NGO. He's doing with you like exactly what another citizen and another policeman doing with you. So this is one of the main problems that I can say. Also, also in a matter of see there, I know many friends who they brought them back. Some of them now, right now, the people who brought them from Malta, I guess recently, and there is a 14-person, oh, sorry, 40-person dying on the Mediterranean. They brought them back to Al Homs Center. There is a new center there, where I guess Homs. It is a city between Tripoli and Masrata, and also there is a new also destination center. I haven't heard about it before, but I knew there is a friend called. I have two friends. Right now they are there, and Zantan destination center, I guess so. And also there is a very bad prison. It's called Usama prison in Zawiya. We had also many refugees inside there. Some of them got help by the UNHRC, and some of them aren't. They just sometimes register to you and visit you and give you the just life basically, but that's not gonna give you your freedom. You need to get out of here, and they need to find a solution for you. Because if you are registered or not, you are a human being at the end. So sometimes they distinguish that there's people registered and those people aren't. They are in the same prison. They crossed the sea and they brought them back and now in a prison. So you need to finish up everybody his file. And in a matter of files inside the UNHRC, I got some problems with not updating files, but got the opportunity to finish up your process. Like you just registered it, it's not enough. If you have your reasons, you need to ask about international protection or whatever. On this interview, I mean, in protection interview, you need to explain all things that you come through. Most people are not allowed for you to access to the UNHCR community services in Gurji because you need protection. That's clear. The number of protection is quite limited, and people, all of them in the same situation, and they come through, yes, different circumstances, but it is also in the same situation. So we all come in the same standard of struggling and violence and persecution and discrimination and sexuality and blah blah blah. This is happening here, but why just a limited of people who access to got protection and not the rest? And that's really a question should be answered by the UNHRC and the plus and how the policy works. I can't infer that, but I have to refer that because the people here are suffering to just got opportunity to be inside and explain their reasons. We all have seen that in a shop street, or that office is being closed, I guess, or in Sarai or in Gurji, the three offices of the UNHRC. And in general way, many people also feeling discrimination inside the UNHRC. And that is not a really big problem, but some people feeling that. I mean, not some people, some refugees feeling that. And I have heard many complaints. When people speak with each other, the refugees speak with each other, they're hearing that there is a Chadian people pretending to be a Sudanese and then to register in the UNHCR. This is a big problem, actually. And they're just trying to lying as possible as they could to got this opportunity. Because I guess according to the UNHCR rules, the Chadian people are not allowed, for example, to register it here. They should go in another country. And also, Sudanese people complaining that they're discriminating between them and Ethiopian people. Ethiopian people, you see, all Ethiopian people are, the process is quickly walking, but Sudanese or the rest of the people aren't. I mean, the refugees aren't. So this complaint is usually we hear it among refugees, and it's really shouldn't be talk about it, but I shouldn't be blame, for example, the UNHRC. But we need to find a solution for those sensitive people, for example, at least. And we should also come back to the EU. The European Union is actually trying to do the best to solve a problem here in Libya, but unfortunately, is not serious to solve any problem. The European Union is not serious to solve the problem of Libyan people, politically or military. Just they are we hearing that usually on from them that they have a meeting, they have a meeting, they have a meeting. Usually they have a meeting, and the meeting, the outline of the meeting, there is no implemented on the reality. Well, I'm not care about the problem because of the Libyan people, because it's political and I can't understand a lot about the political. I'm just care about the human rights and refugee issues. So here, European Union, at least, I'm not gonna put here my condition. Of course, I'm just a refugee and I'm just one of the thousand voice. You can hear it from inside Libya here. Just people here ask about the UNHRC complete their process and they find a safe place. Safe place, it's just any place. They don't have any limited place, for example. Just feeling dangerous in their community and they can't go back home. So they need to go to the third country. The third country can be evacuated. For example, to evacuate them to Niger, that's a safe place for them than here. Actually, I can see that actually because I knew some people. They were in destination center. I know one of them, and he's now feeling safe in Niger. He's just fine. He's just fine, you know. And that's really something that he missed here. He used to miss it here. European Union also has much to do. The fund that we have seen it reported recently by the UNHCR is really quite shameful, actually. During the pandemic or before the pandemic, the same thing. We can't see anything. So we do ask about many people, many vulnerable people need help. I am one of them. I haven't received any financial assistance or any things. Just the only certificates that I had registered and they gave it to me. That's it. I haven't received anything. I have here there is a cash assistance, there is no cash assistance. Most of people who can take, the families can take, but the single now. With the pandemic, also the single now. I don't know why, but I haven't worked since February. I'm just living with a friend. We are 8 in one room with a pandemic. That means I'm not. I don't understand the relationship between the European Union and the United Nations, but the fund, I guess there is a fund coming to this country through both of them. We need that to be related to the people who need it, to the Libyan people who are impacted by the war, and also the refugees. And this at least what I can summarize about my situation here in Libya.
Thank you so much, Hassan. Incredibly comprehensive story. I really appreciate you sharing it. I mean, I think it's a nice time to bring Mattea in as well. You spoke a lot about the role of the UNHCR, the role of the Libyan Coast Guard, and the role of the European Union play in constructing this Mediterranean regime that serves to undermine commitments to fundamental human rights across North Africa and indeed across the continent. So Mattea, maybe we can pass it to you to say a bit about your work, what Sea-Watch is, of course, and how it relates to the story that Hassan Zakaria just relayed about his journey from Sudan and the various challenges that are faced by the refugee community across Tripoli and across Libya, attempting to cross the Mediterranean today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing the story. I agree, of course, with a lot of things you've said, with everything you've said. So I'm here today to speak on behalf of Sea-Watch, a humanitarian rescue organization in the central Mediterranean. Sea-Watch was founded in 2015, basically as a response to the non-activity of the European Union to actually act on what is happening in the Mediterranean. Because as we've just heard, we've been witnessing a lot of people crossing the Mediterranean route, and the European states refused to assist those people and to support them on their journey. So in 2015, a group of people have decided to basically found this organization that is now known as Sea-Watch to kind of monitor different human rights violations on the Mediterranean, as well as also partly on the Aegean Sea, which is close to or between Greece and Turkey. And after a short while, we've kind of realized that it's not enough to just monitor human rights violations that are happening in the Mediterranean, but also that we must act because we've encountered a lot of boats in distress. And because of this happening constantly and nobody acting from the European Union or any other actors involved, we've been carrying out rescue operations for the last 5 years or 4 years now, and will continue to do so in the future.
Could you say a bit more about the experience you've had over the past 5 years in trying to fight against or grapple with institutional frameworks, for example, that claim to or portend to protect these fundamental rights, but actually have served to undermine them? I think many of the people who are watching and listening will know very little about how this mix of IOM and UNHCR, as well as the European Union, collide and collude with the Libyan Coast Guard to prevent migrant crossings, and how exactly maybe the Greece-Turkey deal as well play a similar role in ending the migrant crisis, as many of the viewers and listeners will have heard, which arrived to European shores, as they say, but serve to make the Mediterranean a much more perilous place. Could you speak a bit more about the experience you've had as an activist and the role of Sea-Watch in engaging with those legal frameworks?
So up until basically 2018, we were able to operate quite on a frequent basis. So we've had some sort of cooperation, I mean, limited cooperation, of course. But once we were on the sea and we returned basically to an Italian or a Maltese harbor, we were able to disembark the people and they were able to actually enter the European ground and ask for asylum. Not always, in the way it should be, but at least until 2018, it was somewhat possible. But especially from 2018, with the Minister of Interior Salvini in Italy, things have changed massively. And basically from there on, we witnessed a whole closure of borders, which happened way before. So of course, this is not just just from 2018, but this is something that has been happening throughout the last years. But for humanitarian rescue vessels like Sea-Watch or others, in 2018, we were basically forced to be stranded in harbors in Italy, in Malta, and in these southern European countries because we would not be allowed to actually go back in the Mediterranean and do our jobs, and they would find basically things and reasons for us to not be able to operate. So this has basically happened in the light of a European migration regime that focuses on the externalization of borders, which is not only visible in Libya, of course, but also even beyond. So, for example, in Libya, the case is that we have Europe kind of used the Operation Sophia, so EUNAVFOR Med Sophia, to educate, build, and finance the Libyan Coast Guard, or the so-called Libyan Coast Guard. So what they have been doing is, in these past years, is they've gone out to train these people, to kind of give them old vessels from the French Coast Guard, from the Italian Coast Guard, and others, to pull back these people, as we've just heard, as Hassan experienced twice, to then put them in detention centers. So with this financiation of the Libyan Coast Guard, Europe is actually active in putting people like Hassan and others in detention centers, and they're exploiting them to massive human rights violations. And this is not only happening in Libya as well, but we can witness that these European anti-migration borders, they even expand all the way to the country of Niger, because there in 2015, for example, which also is heavily affecting migrants and people on the move, they have adopted a law for an anti-smuggling law, which they are a big fan to do all around the world, where it's actually now forbidden to transport foreigners all the way through the Sahara, which actually ends up in a criminalization of movement in an ECOWAS area where people are allowed to move. So not even Libya and the Mediterranean borders are now a place where Europe kind of sets its boundaries, but even all the way down to Niger, we can witness that people who actually have the freedom to move are being held back and pushed back to countries as far away as possible from Europe. And there's basically everything done to keep these people away.
I'd like to bring on two of our council members of the Progressive International, Hassan and Angela Nyambola. I'll bring both of you on. Thanks so much for joining us. I think that I'd love for you both, I know you both have experience working in the field of migration, considering these issues of migrant justice, and in particular the role of the European Union and other international NGOs in either enhancing or undermining this so-called fundamental rights regime. And of course, we arrive at this conversation in a very particular moment when the streets are full of protesters who are holding up their fists and proclaiming Black Lives Matter. And yet there's a curious relationship between those who are marching in the streets of Amsterdam or indeed in the streets of Rome, talking about the racist violence happening over there and demanding justice for George Floyd in a place like Minneapolis, and failing to interrogate what's happening right in front of them, right in their own cities where they're living. So maybe I'll pass it over to you, Nanjala. We've heard already about the experiences of various refugees in Tripoli and the engagement with UNHCR as well as the Libyan Coast Guard. And as well, we've heard from Mattea about Sea-Watch's struggle to protect migrant lives on the Mediterranean based in this sort of legal regime. Could you say a bit more about, I know you have a lot of experience in thinking through these issues, maybe you can contextualize this in this conversation in the present moment and what it might mean as protests are erupting around the demand for Black Lives Matter.
Sure, thanks, and thank you for organizing this conversation. I think it's incredibly timely that we take a moment to make exactly those connections that you're talking about. Black Lives Matter, if you think about it as a movement, has its origins in a long discourse and a long practice about taking apart systems of oppression, taking apart systems of white supremacy. And it's really about imagining a world in which all people are treated equally, regardless of their identity. So the claim of Black Lives Matter is really to elevate Black people, Black existences, Black lives in the institutional framework, in a social framework, to say, well, stop treating people like second class, third class, as citizens or individuals or as disposable. And it's impossible to think about this Black Lives Matter moment without thinking about the abolitionist discourse and people who are trying to tear apart the systems that do the work of white supremacy, the systems that actually make these forms of discrimination and systemic violence possible, whether you're talking about prisons, whether you're talking about the police, whether you're talking about the military-industrial complex in the broader sense of the word. And so it's really important for people to make the connection between the carceral state, the state that sees its job as punishing people, as confining people, as restricting people, as Mattea said, as restricting the freedom of movement, and the racist dimensions of that, because whose freedom gets constricted? Is it Europeans who are having their freedom constricted? When you think about the fact that a European passport, most European passports can take you around the world, without needing a visa, without needing to declare your statement of purpose, without even needing to prove that you have the money in the bank account. And meanwhile, you've had stories like Hassan, where we're saying for Black people, not only do you have to prove, quote unquote, your worthiness, but you also have to bring money to the table in order to be considered worthy. So money has become that sort of measure of, you are a good person, you can come in. And the thread that connects these conversations is so strong and it's so clear. Really, when I hear the EU commissioners say things like, there's no racism in Europe because we don't have a history of slavery, blah, blah, blah. It's like, this is happening at your doorstep. When I was tweeting about this event, I tweeted out a picture of a 12-year-old boy who drowned, at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea from Mali, because he was trying to navigate this carceral state that Europe is building, the fortress that Europe is building. So it's really incongruous, and it's really ahistorical to say, well, this is an American problem because America has is narratives that are connected to each other, is a thread that we have to really. And I think that one of the points that I wanted to make really is about Black Lives Matter is inviting us to imagine that a different way is possible, is inviting us to imagine another world, is inviting us to imagine equality on a scale in which humanity hasn't really seen before, whereby we don't measure the worth of a person based on their race and based on their proximity to power. And I think for the people who work in migration, this is really a challenge that we have to take on. And we have to be honest about the power structures that dominate the discourse on migration, and especially between Europe and the Middle East and Europe and Africa. One thing that is very, very clear to anybody who's looking on the surface is how Europe is externalizing its practices on carcerality, that carcerality is a very specific way of Western power, the Western state projecting its power, and it's exporting this discourse into other parts of the world. Mattea spoke about Niger. Niger is just one example. You had the same situation with Sudan, where the EU offered the Sudanese government 2 million euros in order to stop Eritrean, Ethiopian, and Sudanese people from crossing the border to get to Europe. But the Sudanese government that they gave that money to was the Sudanese government that gave people like Hassan a reason to live. It was the government that was starting the wars. It was the government that was oppressing refugees. It was the government that was perpetuating a racist discourse against people in South Kordofan, North Kordofan, where Hassan comes from, Blue Nile state. So, the paradoxes that are created by this exportation of this Western approach to migration they have very real consequences. It's not just a hypothetical that people are talking about in an abstract sense. It actually creates real life consequences when the EU and European governments fail to see the paradoxes that they create by exporting this approach to other parts of the world. And the institution that you would want to speak up for African migrants, the institution that you would want to intervene on behalf of African migrants can't, because it is also captured by this framework. So the African Union, 65% of the AU's budget comes from the EU. And the EU does all the trainings and the meetings, and so much of the AU's praxis on migration is influenced by the EU discourse on preserving fortress Europe. So where does that leave people like Hassan when, you know, there's national government has failed them, regional governments don't have the institutional power, and, you know, international institutions are all kind of, because of the money, because of the influence of money, importing this carceral discourse that actually, is the root cause of all the harm that vulnerable people are having to deal with. I think all in all, what I would want to say to the people who are protesting on behalf of Black Lives Matter in Amsterdam, in Rome, in, Paris or whatever, we all have different ways, entry points of accessing this framework or this discourse. Black Lives Matter to me is a triumph of a very unique kind of scholarship and practice, because it's grounded in real life issues. It's people who looked around at their world and said, a different way is possible. It's building on a long tradition of resistance and organization and grassroots bottom-up knowledge making and institution building and challenging and resistance. And I would invite all those people who are going out to protest to look at the EU and to look at Fortress Europe as one of those institutions that needs to be interrogated using the tools that Black Lives Matter has given us. It's time for us to really start to we imagined our way into carcerality. This stuff is not old. The criminalization of migration across the Mediterranean Sea is not old, and it's not inevitable. It can be challenged. It can be undone. It doesn't have to be this way. And if all of those people could also join that particular movement of saying, well, what would a humane approach to migration look like? What would an inclusive approach to migration look like? What would a Black Lives Matter approach to migration look like? I think we would start to see the kind of fundamental life-saving changes that we need to see.
Yeah, definitely. I was wondering, Assad, maybe if you I know you're in the United Kingdom, which is seeing statues appear to be coming down left and right, and having a reckoning with its own history of racist violence and slave trading. I'm curious, Nanjala's done a brilliant job of contextualizing the conversation we were already having in this present moment when Black Lives Matter solidarity protests are happening all over the world, including in the streets of London and even Oxford. I'm hoping I'm wondering if you might have something to add to Nanjala's comments, as well as reflecting on Mattea's discussion of the broader regime, and particularly in your work at War on Want, about how it fits into, this, what migrant rights mean in the context of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Sure. And first of all, again, thank you for the invitation and for this very, very important conversation. And thank you to all the other people who've spoken, Nanjala. I totally agree with her in terms of the reimagining. And I was struck, when we've looked over the last few weeks from the protests that started on the streets here in the UK and interestingly now spreading across Europe, beginning to ask, as you said, a reckoning of their own imperial past. And as the statues begin to topple about the very people who put Black people in boats to profit from their exploitation, I think we've got to start drawing the link between those people who are sitting by, as we've heard from Mattea, and allowing Black and brown people to literally drown in front of our eyes in the Mediterranean. Because that is part of, I think, the arc of that learning moment. And of course, I've always been struck. One of the slogans from the Black Lives Matter is, of course, been "Say their names." And then when we look at the Mediterranean, we don't even know the names, right, of the people who drown each and every year. They're nameless and faceless. And so that, I think, is our challenge, is to bring that migration debate within to that framework of Black Lives Matter. And I think for a long time, that we've been, the large part of what I would call mainstream civil society has looked at migration and thought, well, the most radical thing we can do is deal with the sort of injustices that there. So we can deal with, or we'll look at the refugee camps or the detention centers And of course, that's all really, really critical. And you know, the more liberal element will start saying, well, we have to humanize migrants. So let's talk about how worthy they are. But they're only worthy if they prop up our health service or do the low-paid jobs that we're not willing to do. But actually, the idea of, you know, the lives and dignity of people is largely absent. We're still giving them, they're only shaped by their economic worth. So I think our challenge at this moment is to be able to tell a much bigger and systemic story of migration, especially forced migration, because of course, one of the narratives we have to challenge is, and we know that, you know, people move for many, many reasons, and often it's as a result of oppression, war, and conflict. But the idea that people are moving, for example, you know, I've always been struck that one of our biggest fights is to take on the argument about economic migration, that the idea that people move for somehow for a paycheck. When we look at the world and we step back and we look at the lens of the world, and we already see that half the world lives under less than $5 a day because we've created an economic model that does that. When the World Bank is saying last week that another 420 million people in the global south are going to be pushed into extreme poverty and living on less than $1.25. When they talk about that half of all jobs in the global south are literally going to be going in terms of this global recession. It strikes me that we have got to put the migration debate into a much bigger analysis of the economic system and the systems of oppression. We already know, if we look at in the last few months, because of the corona lockdown, of course, in the global north, they've used many of the tools that are available to protect their citizens and to protect the health of their citizens and their economies. Tools that are just not available for countries in the global south. Why? Because, of course, we've constructed a system that has not allowed them to be able to do that. So we know that, you know, 4 times the amount of capital flow, for example, has flowed from the global south in the recent few weeks than it did even at the height of the 2008 financial crisis. And if we're remembering this part of this conversation, and I think, again, trying to draw some analogies, if the conversation in now, when we talk about the reckoning of the imperial past, for me, the reckoning of the imperial past is not the physical statues by themselves. Of course, they're important as a moment, but actually to start talking about how the global south developed the global north, both in present terms. So if we look at the last 30 years and we could see 16 trillion in capital flows that flowed from the global south to the north, 13 trillion in illicit tax flows, 4.5 trillion in unsustainable debt repayments. And that's just one part of the picture, right? The other part of the picture, when we put it into a historical colonial context, is, I always tell a story that, when Britain came to India, for example, India's share of global GDP was about 24%. When it left, it was less than 4%. And they'd taken out 45 trillion from India alone, let alone all of the other parts of the empire. It's said that Britain never spent a single penny on any of its imperial expansions and on its than it did from colonialism. And we now are beginning to have that conversation that actually Britain's wealth has been generated through the exploitation of people, whether it was from slavery, but all the way through from colonialism to imperialism. And when we look even at this moment, and I very much believe that we've got to frame that we're in a moment of permanent crisis, right? Where the multiple crises that are impacting the global south and people of color in the global south are not only, immense now, but of course are going to get much, much worse. Whether it's, the corona pandemic, and of course the global north, it's coming out of first wave of the pandemic. Much of the global south has not even entered properly into the first wave yet. And as I said, without any of the tools, I mean, even the very basic ones, Germany has 48 doctors per 10,000 people. Even the richest countries in the global south, like India, only have about 8, whilst countries like Sierra Leone have 0.2%. Again, we have to ask why. Well, that was because of course, the decisions by the structural adjustment programs by the IMF and World Bank, which demanded that Sierra Leone cut its public sector and cut its health service. And these crises, as they come together, from climate, the killer floods and droughts, the devastation of lives and livelihoods. And as the UN Special Rapporteur on poverty it said last year, you know, we are creating a world of climate apartheid. And when he talked about climate apartheid, he talked about how the wealthy will inure themselves, be able to use the tools that are at their disposal to be able to, you know, live more comfortably, whilst the global south, the poorest or more vulnerable, will be left to starve, to die from a lack of access to water, etc. And I think that's, you know, that's also part of this Black Lives story we've got to tell. And of course, got to tell the story of why we have got the wars and the in many parts of the world. And of course, you know, Europe, Italy, France, Germany, Britain, you know, are responsible for a quarter of all global arms sales. And we can look immediately, when you look at the people who, for example, who are in the forced migration, people from Yemen, people from the Indian subcontinent, when you look at Africa and you look at people coming from West Africa, and you trace back where they come from, you see what I call the permanent crisis, whether it's conflict, whether it's climate, whether it's inequality. And of course, we have had a large hand in that, our imperial ventures, whether it's been Lumumba overthrowing leaders like Lumumba in Congo, Mossadegh in Iran, or, you know, the war in Iraq. Now, I think there's a big challenge for us in this migration debate, that of course we have to defend the right to move. And I think what I would say, that's about survival migration, right? About how do you survive these multiple crises. And of course, we've got to defend the right of people to return, particularly people living under occupation, whether it's Palestine or the Western Sahara, etc. But I think we've also got to start making an argument. How do we give people the right not to move? Because many people, of course, as we know, are forcibly displaced. And most of the people who are displaced either internally in a country or across a border to another poorer country, and so have absolutely no one legal protection. But much more importantly, you know, are left without any of the means to be able to make the decisions that will, you know, protect them and their family. And that, I think, loops us back into beginning to have a conversation that says the right not to move is the fight for economic inequality, the fight for universal basic income, for social protection, for universal public services, for workers' rights. It's about the right to food and energy. And that, I think, gives us an ability to rebuild internationalism on both a race, class, and gender basis that connects the struggles in the global north and the global south, so that the fight around migrant justice is not seen as a separate fight to the fights that many people are engaging in their own domestic nation state, but that begins to connect these issues and begins to actually start to say, what is the systems of oppression and how do we tackle what those systems of oppression are? And I know it's, a lot of people don't use that term anymore, but I think, you know, when we look back at our movements and the black icons that are now being feted in the Black Lives Matter, it's absolutely important that we do that, but it's also important that we take on board their analysis, we take on board their strategy and thinking, and about the importance of rooting our struggles in basically both in an anti-imperialist and an anti-colonial framework. And I think that gives us the ability to be able to connect neoliberalism, climate, survival migration, and the historical exploitation of the global south.
Thank you, Hassan. I mean, I think it's a tremendous way of zooming out from the problems or the narrow crises we've been discussing to contextualize them in a broader historical and geographical frame. I do also want to, you know, bring Mattea back into conversation. The title of this talk is, of course, Internationalism at Sea, and we've had a quite wide-ranging discussion toggling between the local and the global and the present and the past. And I wanted to give you the floor again. Maybe if you could help us understand a bit more, you know, insofar as part of the mission of what we're doing here is to make solidarity more than a slogan. And I think for many of us, Sea-Watch is a real inspiration of people who take matters into their own hands and really try to deliver justice for migrants in a way that the authorities, despite all that rhetoric, are unwilling to. And maybe you could help us and our viewers and our listeners understand a bit better about how should we as activists and people who care about these issues understand what Sea-Watch is doing. What can we do? I mean, if you were to think about someone who's protesting and wants in the European context or indeed in the global context and is concerned about these issues, I mean, it's all quite abstract when we get to the language of sort of legal frameworks and deals between countries that feel a bit out of reach. Maybe you could give us a bit of a sense of what the narrow fight is now and what those of us who are outside Sea-Watch but want to support Sea-Watch could be doing.
Yeah, thanks first of all for the very insightful talks. I think a lot of things, maybe to jump on also a little bit about the conversation we just had. So basically, I mean, what Sea-Watch stands for is the freedom of movement, no matter what. So there is no difference in who is moving, what are the reasons why these people are moving, and where do they want to go. So for us, this is really what we are trying to implement in also our active work, to not really act as these authorities who try to put a category on people to kind of explain why they're moving and what are the reasons they're moving for. And we're doing this to really condemn the politics of the European Union, because as they are kind of, you know, basically bursting out in solidarity, but at the end really feeding into nationalist ideas not only in their, you know, politics on the ground, but also in their policy responses beyond the European borders. And we understand our work basically as a countermeasurement to these European politics, not only on the European soil, but even beyond. And what we've witnessed in the past is that basically that this solidarity that this European Union is celebrating, and this, you know, internationalist approach on solidarity, etc., is actually really only alive within movements of people that are in solidarity with people on the move and others as well. But I think a big reason for this is the narrative we're using, and the narrative the European Union is using, and the narrative that movements like Sea-Watch or Black Lives Matter, what other organizations on the ground are moving. Because if we keep on using specific categories for people who are on the move, we are not going to be able to, you know, give migrant justice. And for me, even with this term, I might have some slight problems, because I'd rather, you know, use mobility justice, because at the end, it's really state powers who rely on these policy categories. Because if they do try to implement any forms of policies like the externalization of borders, etc., they need to somehow identify a target group that they can implement these policies on. And I think we need to change our narrative and how we talk about people. And we need to start of when people arrive. It doesn't matter where they arrive, if they arrive on a boat or if they arrive on land. We need to stop asking who these people are and try to put a label on these people. Because, you know, you've mentioned it before, I said, when we talk about people who kind of want to diversify their economic income, and when they're from Western countries, they're labeled as expats, easy as that. But when they're from, you know, non-industrialized countries, they're suddenly labeled as economic migrants. And we have this divide in the narrative of how we talk about people and what names we give people. And I think we really, really need to make ourselves aware that we, you know, need to be more sensitive about how we actually label people, because all these labels, whatever, if it's migrant, refugees, if it's, you know, economic migrant, you name it, they're all basically, I mean, structured categories by the European Union to implement policies on their behalf. And I think this is something that we all can do together to try to understand migration as a much more diverse thing, and not just something that we can put a category upon.
Definitely. I'm aware of time and us coming to the end of our session. I feel like we could go for another hour, 2 hours, but I want to thank everyone for their time. I mean, in particular, I really want to thank Hassan Zakaria, who joined us today from Tripoli to share his experiences from moving from Sudan and encountering the Libyan Coast Guard and the UNHCR as well. I want to give a deep thanks to Asad Nanjala from our PI Council, who joined us today to deliver such insightful comments about the role of mobility in global political economy, as well as contextualizing it in the broad history of colonialism and imperialism from places like the United Kingdom and Europe. And finally, I really want to thank Mattea and the whole Sea-Watch team, a really critical member of our Progressive International, for their deeply inspiring work and for joining us today. I hope it's the first conversation of many, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in and it's really great to be able to host this conversation in the context of this crucial juncture at which the intersection of race, class, and status is really coming back into the fore. So I want to thank you all for tuning in, and I hope to see you all soon. And for now, I hope you have a lovely evening or afternoon, wherever you may be in the world. Take care.